My husband keeps getting constant notifications and hides his phone from me. When I asked him about it, he said I was being paranoid. But then I saw one that made my stomach drop. Hello everyone, I never thought I'd be the kind of person to question my husband's behavior, let alone share my story like this. But here I am, because something in my marriage shifted, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm not just being paranoid. My husband and I have been together for years, through ups and downs, laughter and tears. We built a life together based on love, trust, and the understanding that no matter what, we'd always be honest with each other. At least, that's what I believed. Lately, though, something has changed. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a shadow creeping into our relationship. My husband began receiving notifications more frequently than ever before. His phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter or nightstand, became something he kept glued to his side. At first, I didn't think much of it. People get busier. Work demands more. Social circles expand. I told myself I was overthinking things. But then I started noticing patterns. The constant buzzing during dinner, followed by a quick glance and a swift screen-down placement. The way he angled his phone away from me when we sat on the couch. The hushed tones when he'd answer calls and step out of the room, always with some half-hearted excuse, "It's just work," or "nothing important." One evening, as we were watching TV, his phone buzzed again. Out of instinct, I glanced over, but he immediately tilted the screen away, locking it before I could see anything. That was the moment it hit me. He was hiding something. My heart clenched, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to jump to conclusions without a real reason. Still, doubt had settled into my mind like an unwelcome guest. I tried to ignore it, but the signs kept piling up. He started taking his phone with him everywhere, even into the bathroom. Late at night, I'd catch the faint glow of the screen reflecting off the walls, even though he'd sworn he was exhausted. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe it was a work crisis, or maybe he had joined a new online community. But why not just tell me? Why the secrecy? My gut told me something wasn't right. One night, I decided to confront him, not in an accusatory way, but just to ease my own mind. I took a deep breath and asked, "Hey, I've noticed you've been on your phone a lot more lately. Is everything okay?" He barely looked up. "Yeah, just work stuff. You know how it is." I pressed a little further. "It just seems like you're really protective of your phone lately. You always used to leave it lying around, and now you take it everywhere." That was when his whole demeanor shifted. He sighed loudly, setting his phone down, screen down, of course, and rubbing his temples. "Come on, are we really doing this? You're overthinking things. You always do this." My stomach twisted at his words. The dismissal. The way he made it sound like I was the problem for even asking. "I'm just saying, if it's nothing, then why are you being so secretive?" His tone sharpened. "I'm not being secretive. You're being paranoid." There it was. That word. Paranoid. As if my concerns were completely baseless, as if I were imagining things. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But deep down, I knew something was off. You don't just start hiding your phone for no reason. You don't suddenly become defensive over a simple question unless there's something you don't want to admit. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling while he slept soundly. My mind replayed our conversation over and over. Was I really being paranoid? Or was he gaslighting me into doubting my own instincts? The next morning, I decided I wouldn't bring it up again. If he had something to hide, I knew I wouldn't get the truth by asking. I had to be patient. I had to wait for the moment when the truth would reveal itself. And then, one night, it did. That night, as my husband slept beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing. His words echoed in my head, "You're being paranoid." But was I? Everything inside me screamed that something wasn't right. I had spent years with this man, memorizing his habits, his little quirks, the way he acted when he was happy, stressed, or guilty. And right now, he wasn't acting like the man I knew. I wasn't going to let myself spiral into blind suspicion, but I also couldn't ignore the way he had brushed me off, the way he had flipped the situation to make me feel unreasonable. If I had nothing to worry about, why was he being so defensive? Then, the moment that changed everything happened. It was around 2 a.m. when I heard the soft vibration of his phone against the nightstand. I turned my head, watching as the screen lit up faintly in the darkness. I wasn't trying to pry, I told myself that over and over. But my breath caught in my throat when I saw the preview message flash across the screen for a split second before it disappeared. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. My entire body stiffened. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, and for a moment, I wondered if I had imagined it. But no, I knew what I saw. There was no misinterpreting those words. Someone had sent my husband a message that had nothing to do with work or casual conversation. Someone who had seen him last night. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Had he really been working late, like he said? Was this why he had been so protective of his phone? My hands clenched into fists under the covers as I lay there, frozen in place. For a moment, I considered waking him up right then and there. Confronting him. Demanding an explanation. But I knew how that conversation would go. He would deny it. He would say I was imagining things, twisting things. He would gaslight me into believing I had read it wrong. I wasn't ready for that yet. I needed to be sure. I needed proof. So I waited. I barely slept, every muscle in my body tense as I listened to his steady breathing beside me. The next morning, I watched him closely as he got ready for the day. He acted completely normal. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work, just like always, as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had changed. The moment he walked out the door, I took a deep breath and made a decision. I needed to see his phone. I had never been the type of person to invade someone's privacy like this, but I also wasn't the type to ignore my gut when it was screaming at me that something was wrong. I knew his passcode. Or at least, I thought I did. But when I picked up his phone and tried to unlock it, my heart sank. It had changed. That was all the confirmation I needed. He had never changed his passcode in years. Not once. And now, suddenly he had? I felt sick to my stomach. He was hiding something, and he was making sure I couldn't find it. That day, I felt like a ghost moving through my routine. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't think straight. My mind kept replaying that message over and over. Last night was amazing. Last night. The night he said he was working late. Was he cheating? The possibility felt like a knife twisting in my chest, but I needed more than a gut feeling and a single message. I needed undeniable proof. So I decided to test him. That evening, when he got home, I acted normal. I didn't mention the message. I didn't mention his passcode change. Instead, I smiled, kissed his cheek, and asked how his day was. I needed him to think I suspected nothing. And it worked. He relaxed, laughing at dinner, scrolling on his phone absent-mindedly. But I noticed every time a notification popped up, he made sure to glance at it discreetly before quickly swiping it away. Then I made my move. "Hey," I said casually. "Let me borrow your phone for a second? Mine's dead and I need to check something real quick." It was a simple request. An innocent one. And yet, his entire demeanor changed in an instant. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes flickered with something of panic? Guilt? Why don't you just use your laptop?" he said, forcing a laugh. "It's right there." I tilted my head, pretending not to notice his sudden tension. "I just need to check a message real quick. It'll only take a second." He hesitated. For far too long. Then he let out a breath, shaking his head. "Wow, you really don't trust me, do you?" There it was. The deflection. The attempt to turn the situation around on me. "It's just a phone," I said, keeping my voice calm. "If there's nothing to hide, why won't you hand it to me?" He scoffed. "I can't believe this. First, you accuse me of being secretive, and now you want to go through my phone? This is exactly why I changed my passcode." I froze. He had just admitted it. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, my heart was hammering. "So you did change it?" He clenched his jaw. "Yeah, because I knew you'd pull something like this. You're acting crazy, you know that." My blood ran cold. I had given him every opportunity to reassure me, every chance to prove me wrong. And instead, he was doubling down, making me feel like I was the problem. I nodded slowly. You're right, I said, standing up. I am acting crazy, but only because something isn't adding up. I walked away before he could respond, before I lost my composure. Because I knew the truth now. He was lying to me. And I was going to find out exactly why. I walked away, my heart pounding in my chest, but my mind was clearer than ever. There was no more room for doubt. No more second-guessing myself. My husband was hiding something. No, he was lying to me, and he was doing everything in his power to make me feel like I was the crazy one for suspecting it. But I wasn't crazy. And I wasn't going to let him manipulate me into believing otherwise. That night, I barely spoke to him. I could feel his eyes on me at times, like he was waiting for me to snap, to lash out, to accuse him outright. But I didn't. I kept my movements measured, my face unreadable. I was done playing his game. Instead, I had already decided what I needed to do. The next morning, I told him I had errands to run. He barely looked up from his phone, nodding absent-mindedly. I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and instead of heading to the grocery store like I said I would, I drove to his office. I wasn't even sure what I expected to find, but I had to know. I had to see for myself if I was imagining things, if I was really just being paranoid, or if my entire marriage was about to come crashing down around me. When I arrived, I waited. I parked my car a short distance away and watched the entrance to the building, my pulse hammering as the minutes crawled by. I had no real plan, no idea what I was even looking for, but I refused to leave until I had something, anything, that would tell me the truth. And then I saw it. Or rather, her. A woman. Tall. Dark hair. Dressed professionally, but there was something about her demeanor, something familiar. She wasn't just a coworker. I could tell from the way she hesitated near the entrance, glancing around as if she were nervous. And then, my stomach twisted when my husband stepped out of the building. My breath caught. He wasn't just walking out casually, the way he normally would after work. No, he knew she was waiting for him. His entire body language shifted the moment he saw her. He glanced around quickly, then walked up to her in a way that was far too intimate for just colleagues. And then, my worst fear was confirmed. He leaned in and kissed her. Right there, in broad daylight. As if our marriage didn't even exist. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My stomach churned, my mind going blank for a moment, unable to process what I had just seen. This is real. This is actually happening. I wanted to storm out of the car, to scream, to make a scene, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed frozen, watching as they exchanged a few words, laughing before walking off together, side by side, disappearing into a cafe just down the street. I had my proof. I had more than enough proof. And yet, all I felt was emptiness. I drove home in a daze. The entire ride felt surreal, my hands numb on the steering wheel, my mind replaying the moment over and over again like a broken record. I had spent years with this man. I had built a life with him. And now, it felt like I was watching it all shatter into a million pieces right before my eyes. By the time I stepped through the front door, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I didn't wait for him to get home. I didn't need to hear any more excuses, any more gaslighting, any more attempts to twist the narrative in his favor. I wasn't going to give him the chance to manipulate me into doubting myself again. Instead, I packed my things. I wasn't reckless about it, I was calm, calculated. I took only what I needed, leaving behind everything else. The wedding photos, the gifts, the memories that no longer felt like they belonged to me. And then, before I left, I took one final step. I grabbed a piece of paper, my hand steady as I wrote a short, final note. No long explanations. No desperate pleas for answers I already knew I wouldn't get. Just the truth. I saw everything. You don't have to lie anymore. I deserve better. I placed it on the kitchen table, right where he'd see it when he walked in. And then, without looking back, I walked out the door. I didn't know exactly where I was going or what came next, but for the first time in weeks, I felt lighter. Free. Because no matter how painful the truth was, it was still better than living in a lie. And I refused to be part of his deception any longer.